Okay, so good evening to you all and welcome to this presentation. My objective here is to help you achieve your best performance on May the 19th at the Granfondo Vosges and hopefully for you to qualify for the World Championships in Denmark later this year. So that's what we're going to look at all along this evening. Let's begin by talking about what it takes to qualify. The best way to do that is by taking a look at what happened at this same event in 2023. Okay, these are the finishing times and average speeds for the slowest qualifier in each category at the Granfondo. And the rule is that the first 25% are qualified. So depending on your age, in 2023, you needed to achieve an average speed somewhere between 29 kilometers per hour for the 55 to 59-year-olds and 32.7 kilometers an hour for the youngest guys. So that was the minimum you needed to qualify. It's the last person to qualify. Considering the amount of climbing, this is actually a pretty high standard, and there's no reason to expect anything different in 2024. Coming down to the Medio Fondo, here's the same data for the men aged 60 and above and for all the women. I'm not going to comment this in detail other than to say that it's also a pretty high standard. Don't forget that, of course, the average speed is on a course with a lot of climbing, so you can't compare this with your average speed on a flat course. Make sure you compare things which are comparable if you're looking at average speeds. So here are the two courses. They've changed somewhat since 2023, but have pretty much the same distance and characteristics. The Granfondo has 14 short climbs. It depends a little bit how you count them, but I count 14. The longest of which is 8 kilometers, and that's really, it's largely a false flat. The average is 4 kilometers per climb, so it's a bunch of short climbs. The Medio Fondo, very similar, of course, a bit fewer, 11 short climbs. Again, the longest is 8, and the average length of those climbs is 4.3 for the Medio Fondo. The only steep climb of any length is the fourth one on both courses, which is the Col du Mont de Fourche, which includes approximately 2 kilometers at between 10 and 13%. So that's certainly quite steep for a couple of kilometers. But the rest of the climbs are all very reasonable. We're talking of, some of them are even false flats, really. So 3-4% up to 6-7%. The two courses, the Granfondo and the Medio Fondo, are identical until kilometer 90.5, where they diverge. The two starts are only 15 minutes apart, so the faster Medio Fondo riders, the Medio Fondo starts 50 minutes after the Granfondo, the faster Medio Fondo riders will fairly quickly catch up with the slower Granfondo riders. Because the climbs are short, anyone who's going to qualify will be getting up the climbs in 15 to 20 minutes and riding mostly in zone 4 or even in zone 5 for some of the time. This is going to be a very, very hard event if you want to qualify. You're going to have to be ready to suffer. There are two essential skills to qualify on this course. The first is group riding, even on the climbs, because the gradient is often less than 5 or 6%, so it'll still be worth drafting on the climbs. And the second skill is fueling for the high amount of zone 4 and zone 5 efforts. But before we get into the details, of course, those are not the only skills, but those are probably the two really biggest ones that are going to make the difference. So before we get into the details, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the taper in the last couple of, we're 2 weeks away from it now. So you should continue to train normally for the time being until about 5 or 10 days before the event. 5 to 10 days is a pretty wide range because tapering is highly individual. And what works for one person may not work for another. Your taper should be longer if you're older, less fit, less strong, or recover slowly, and shorter if the opposite. If in doubt, back off sooner. Remember, the goal of the taper is to eliminate fatigue without losing fitness. Okay, so training hard right up to the event is very risky for little payoff. So if in doubt, it's better to back off. My general suggestion is to reduce training volume by at least 50% in the final few days, but to maintain at least some intensity. Again, this is highly individual, and particularly for strong riders or very strong riders, an aggressive taper can be beneficial. So you can reduce the training volume perhaps by a bit less than 50% and maintain more intensity. But that's something you've got to feel out for yourself. There's no hard and fast rule on it. It's highly individual. I've personally learned that as I get older, I'm better off being fully rested. So I reduce the volume and I reduce the intensity by a lot. Now, a word about carb loading. This is worth doing in the last few days before the event. The point of carb loading is to ensure your glycogen stores are full before the start, in the same way you'd fill the tank of your car before a long journey. There's no need to be obsessive about this. It's simple, really. You just eat an extra serving of carbs per meal on the Thursday and the Friday before the event, and then eat normally on Saturday. Okay, there's no point in stuffing yourself with carbs on the Saturday. It's really a bit late. Remember to compensate for the extra calories you're eating by eating less fat on those 2 days. So cut down on things like butter, oil, cheese, fatty meats, and so on and so forth. If you're eating a lot of pasta, then go easy on the olive oil and the parmesan. Now, doing this, you may still gain some weight, but this is nothing to worry about because it will be mostly water stored with the glycogen, and it will be released during the event. So don't worry about it. Now, let's take a close look at the start and the early part of the course. You need a really good warm-up to be ready for the fast uphill start. Okay, make sure you do at least 15 to 20 minutes of warming up and include some short, hard efforts to get your heart rate up. There's a big advantage to starting at the front, so get in the pen early. And of course, when you're in there, you want to stay warm. Ideally, you want to be wearing a nice warm jacket that you can hand to a helper or a family member before the start. If you can't do that, if there's no one you can hand the jacket to, then one thing you can do is wear some bin liners and then just discard them at the last minute. Just put them down by the barrier at the last minute. You need to be mentally ready for the effort because it's going to be super hard straight off the gun. So prepare yourself in those last few minutes. Prepare yourself, focus, and be ready for that hard effort. And equally, it's very important to be well hydrated for that. And so drink in those last few minutes and take a gel just a couple of minutes before the start. Once you've started, it will be very hard to drink or eat anything for the first 45 minutes to an hour or so. So here's what it looks like. The first, it's literally straight off uphill for 1.8 kilometers to the Col de Grand-Besse. It's not very steep, it's only 4%. So it'll probably take 4 to 5 minutes of effort. Okay, it will obviously go off super hard because everyone wants to get over the first climb in the lead group. So it'll be crazy out there. So you want to pick a strong wheel and try to stay with it. Pick someone in front of you who's big and really strong and try and stay with them. Once you're over the climb, you have a 9-kilometer descent to recover. So it doesn't matter if you go really pretty deep for these first 5 minutes. There's a left turn after about 1.3 kilometers. Here, there's a picture of it from Google Earth. You can see it's a wide and open turn. The road continues to climb after the turn. The road will certainly be closed here, so you can take the inside of this corner. I strongly recommend being on the left for this corner here. Now, because this is going to start really, really very, very hard, I want to show you a quick video from another event, which was actually very similar. I think it's quite useful to have a picture of this. So here we are right at the start. Everyone's now moving forward slowly as usual because everyone's too close together. Clip in over the line, and at this point, everyone then starts to accelerate as hard as they can, and everyone's trying to get in front. In fact, so people get in the way. You have to dive in and out. You have to try and find a wheel to follow. But I mean, this guy's going too slowly for me, so I had to duck around inside. Now, this is slightly further on where it's quite a steep climb already. And here I was in zone 5 going up this session here. And there were still people going past me. Look at this guy here on the right. So he's diving in and out. People block you. You have to find your way through. It's absolutely manic. Everyone's really pushing themselves to the limit. It's going to be like this, exactly like this, at the start of the Granfondo Vosges. I can guarantee it. All right. So once you're over the top, it's a 9-kilometer descent. It's going to be very, very fast because it's a straight and fairly wide road. The descent starts just after the corner, and it finishes down at the bottom there. It's not very steep. It's not a very steep descent. It's only 3.5%. So it's a bit more, but it's a bit more than a false flat. There's essentially only the one bend. You can see there a left-hand bend, but it's wide open. I didn't bother to put a picture of that. It's wide open, so it'll be easy to get round. You're going to really have to keep your wits about you on that long straight because it'll be very, very fast. Many people will be descending very aggressively. So keep your wits about you and be careful. All right, the end of it is potentially quite dangerous because there's a sharp right-hand turn in a residential area. Everyone's going to have to slow down for that, which will mean that all the groups start bunching up, and there's a risk of people misjudging their braking. So there's a potential for accidents there. So be careful. You want to be on the right-hand side of the road. To take the corner, just dive into the corner if you can and get around quickly. This is the sort of place where anyone that rides criteriums will be really have an advantage. Here's what the corner looks like on Google Earth. You can see it's quite narrow, it's residential, and you've just got to get round there. There'll be dozens of other riders around you, most likely. Once you're around, it continues to descend for another 100 meters or so, and then it starts up again. So the second climb starts very soon after the corner. You want to try to carry as much speed as possible through the corner and then accelerate at a high cadence so you hit the bottom of the climb fast and carry your momentum up the early part of the climb. This is what the start of that climb looks like. So the road's fairly narrow. The total climb is 5.4 kilometers at 4.1%, so it's not a steep climb, and it will definitely pay to draft behind a strong rider. The top of the climb is at the Col de la Croix des Moines, as it's called. Now, rather than easing off, as most people do, try to accelerate over the col to gain a few places and to be in a good position to descend. Okay, so most people ease off. That's a mistake. And it's much better to accelerate over the col. This is what it looks like. Here's the top of the climb, and the route turns left off the main road here, and then goes immediately down where the arrow is pointing. On that descent, there are several tight hairpin bends or switchbacks. The first one is after just 1 kilometer, and the slope just before it is -8%. So you're going to arrive very, very fast at this bend here. This is what it looks like. The road is pretty narrow, and there's not much room for error. So it's a dangerous corner here. I wouldn't be astonished if there are accidents on that corner. So please be careful. After 5.5 kilometers of descent, you're going to go through the village of Cornimont, and then there's another 6 kilometers of false flat descending after the village. But beware, there's another dangerous point here. There's a very hard right-hand turn in Cornimont. So make sure again that you're on the inside of that corner. I think it'll be made safe by the organizer, so you can be on the right hand, be right on the right and inside that corner. This is what it looks like. So make sure you turn well and then get on the wheels for the next 6 kilometers of false flat. Okay, so I'm going to stop the route analysis here. But if you're serious about qualifying, I strongly suggest you continue this sort of analysis yourself and try to identify each bottleneck or choke point and where you need to be at the front of the group that you're riding with. Okay, let's talk now about pacing. Getting your pacing right means constantly asking your questions. And it's really, pacing is the art of finding your limit, as Matt Fitzgerald says. Matt Fitzgerald is an American coach who's made a real speciality out of pacing. And so the questions you have to ask yourself all the time are, can I sustain this effort level for the remaining distance? Or an alternative question is, am I going a little too fast, about right, or a little too slow? Now, most of the climbs are short, so you'll be doing them in zone 4 or even zone 5. And then on the false flats, you'll be riding as hard as you can in the wheels. So this is going to be a very tough event, and you're going to have to judge it so that you don't go too far into the red and burn too many matches. Now, none of what I've said so far tells you exactly how hard to ride in terms of an actual number. You need to judge your pace to be as close as possible to your limit for the distance, obviously, but this isn't easy to do. Okay, your race pace should be derived from evidence and not from hope, says Alan Couzens, who's a well-known American, he's actually Australian, but lives in America, triathlon coach. Now, the problem is that it's your decision is subject to error because it's based upon in the moment, it's based upon the excitement and the adrenaline and the other riders overtaking you and so on, which makes you want to ride harder. So it's very easy to get carried away and to ride harder than you should, and then to regret it half an hour or an hour later. The thing is, miracles don't happen very often, and it's very unlikely that you'll be much stronger at the Granfondo Vosges than you were in training or at other events. So you want to go back to your own data. Let's look at the evidence. So let's see how you can use the evidence to create a pacing plan for yourself. The best evidence, of course, comes from your power meter, assuming it's always calibrated and the data is accurate. Because if it isn't, it's useless. But if it is, it gives a really good frame of reference. If you don't have a power meter, then you'll have to ride on feel, which is not bad, but you've got to really pay attention to your feelings in that case and be very aware of them. So here's some of my data. This is a power duration chart. And so this gives the maximum power that I was able to put out at any time interval between 1 second and I don't know, 12 or 13 hours. So you should have your own data on a power duration chart. If you use some software or look at it on Training Peaks or something, you can find this. So in this example, you want to identify your best efforts at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 20 minutes, because that's basically the range of times that you're going to be doing the climbs on the Granfondo Vosges. Okay, so in this example, from my own data, my best 5 minute was 341 watts. I know when I did this that I completely emptied the tank to get that number. Okay, so I also know that it would be foolish to try and do a 5 minute climb during the event at anywhere near that power output. And in fact, I should probably knock it down by 20 or 30 watts. Okay, how far below is a matter of experience, judgment, and of course, current ability. For you, it might be a bit less, it might be a bit more. I've got numbers, of course, for the 10 minutes, 310 watts, and the 20 minutes, 295 watts. So again, if I knew I'm going to do a 20-minute climb in an event like the Granfondo Vosges, I would probably aim at something like 270 watts, 270, 275, depending how I feel on the day. Now, if you do the same analysis for yourself, you can establish target numbers for each climb based on the estimated time you'll take. And your best result is going to come from making each climb at the highest sustainable power while drafting other riders. And that's the way you'll get your best result, because that will give you the highest speed up the climb. Of course, if you're drafting someone, that will give you a little bit of extra speed for the same power as if you're on your own. Here are some more tips for the climbs. The first thing is you need to know how long the climb is when you're in the ride. It's all very well knowing it when you're doing that preparation work, but you need to know that when you're on the bike, on the ride. So if for many people, our bike computer tells us the distance to the top of the climb and the average percentage as well as the immediate percentage. So that can really help with the timing of your effort on a climb to stay with a group. For example, if you're on a 5 to 10 minute climb and you know you're near the top, you might put in some zone 5 intensity work in the last couple of minutes to really stay with that group if they're getting away from you. But if you're mistaken and it's a false top you arrive at, and in reality there's another 4 minutes to the real top, then you'll lose a lot of time recovering from that badly timed effort while you're still on the climb itself. Okay, you want to be able to recover from that effort on the descent, not when you're still on the climb. So if your Garmin or whichever head unit you're using has that data, great. If not, and by the way, the older Garmins are pretty poor on that. They can be out by several hundred meters on the calculations. It's only the new Garmins which are very accurate. So be wary of that. An alternative, of course, is to have some masking tape on your top tube and just write the data on that, the distances, the tops of climbs, and the feed stations and so on, marked on that with the kilometers. That can keep you aware of what's coming up. So now, the next point is to try to start the climbs near the front of the group. Why? It means you can go slightly easier up the climb and drift back a little bit in the group without losing the group. Okay, if you start at the back, you're going to lose the group very quickly if you start to ease off. Okay, so it gives you a little bit of a rest on the climb, or it makes the climb slightly easier if you're right at the front at the beginning and you just drift back a little bit until you get near the very top when you should make that effort to get over. The pace on most of the climbs is going to be high enough to draft, so obviously make sure you do that. And the next point is to observe closely the other riders that are around you. That's going to tell you whether you can stay with this group or not. If you're at your maximum and nearly being dropped, and the rest of the group is at a medium effort, they seem to be okay, then it's likely you're going to get dropped either on this climb or one of the next ones. So there's little point in killing yourself to stay with them. The next group's going to be slightly slower, but it won't be much. So it's better to save your energy to stay in that next group, which is probably only 30 seconds or a minute behind at the most. On the other hand, if you're climbing in the middle of a group and you're working hard, but everybody else looks like they're working equally hard, so you're all suffering at about the same extent, this is a good group for you. And you're probably slow. The group and you will probably slow down more or less at the same time. Everyone's going to get tired at a similar sort of rate. So you'll all slow down together as the event goes on. So in that case, if you seem to be at about the same level as everybody, then push hard to stay with them. You've got to make that effort necessary to stay with them. Okay, now coming to group riding. In order to qualify, it's essential to be a confident, experienced group rider. You've got to be able to stay in the peloton, stay in the group. If you have no experience of group riding, this is not the place to be learning it. You need to learn it somewhere else. I'm going to assume you already have a good level, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about the basics of how to ride in the wheels or how to participate in a chain gang. Okay, the less comfortable you are riding very close to the wheel in front, the more efforts you're going to have to make to stay there, and the sooner you're going to get dropped. All right, so stay as close as you can to that wheel in front, and stay, of course, very, very alert so that you don't cause an accident. But the closer you are within reason, the better. You want to be 20, 30 centimeters back from it all the time. All right, so in group riding, the first point is obvious. You should aim to be in a group that's just slightly stronger than you, but not so much stronger that you quickly get dropped. Okay, you want to be, if you're a good group rider, you can ride with people that are stronger than you because you're taking full advantage of the drafting. It doesn't mean you're never on front either. You can still you should still come through and be on the front. You're only going to stay there for 15 seconds or so before the next person's going to come and support you. Okay, so the rest is about positioning. where to be in the group, and especially when to move to the front. If the group's rolling through in a chain gang, which is typically going to be the case when it's around 10 riders or less, then roll through with them and take your turn on the front. This is actually often easier than trying to hang on the back, on the wheels which are on the back and sort of keep moving around. And it will also make the whole group move much faster. So again, it's only about 15 seconds worth of effort, and then you'll be back on a wheel anyway. Then you want to make a real effort to get on the front before reaching a tight intersection, a tight turn, because what always happens is the group gets stretched out. You get the concertina effect, where it gets stretched out as people slow to go round and through the intersection, and then everybody's got to make a huge effort to get back on. But the second guy makes a good effort, the third guy makes a bigger effort, the fourth guy makes an even bigger effort. By the time you get to the 10th, it's a huge effort you've got to make to get back on. So that's why it's important to be near the front. You don't necessarily have to be the first rider, but you want to be in second or third place. Same thing when you get to the start of the climbs. You want to be at the front because, well, as I mentioned earlier, that allows you to drift back, but also because the group will tend to bunch up across the road at the start of a climb as everybody arrives on it quite fast and then automatically slows down. So people are arriving fast behind people who are slowing down, and that means the group tends to spread out and bunch up completely across the road and basically block the road. So if you're arriving fast behind, you're going to be forced to slow down and you'll lose a lot of momentum. So much better to be in front. Okay, and then any other bottlenecks, of course, that you know are coming up, be in front, because again, you're going to suffer from the concertina effect if you're not. All right, let's look now at fueling, so nutrition and hydration. Whether you get this right or wrong will have a massive impact on your performance. Why is that? Because it's important to understand that the Granfondo is going to cost you an extra 4,000 calories or so over and above the 2,000 that you normally need to stay alive, without doing any hard exercise. And there's no way you can consume that many calories during the event. A typical gel is between 100 and 150 calories. So you'd have to take 25 gels or more, and nobody can take that many gels. You'd be sick long before the end. So as I already mentioned, it's best to start with a full tank. You want to have plenty of carbs the week before, pasta, rice, potatoes, and so on the Thursday and Friday. Eat normally the day before, the Saturday, maybe limiting fiber because you don't want too much in your blocking your stomach. And then have a carb-heavy breakfast 3 hours before the start. Now, the start's at 7:30 or 7:45, so that means waking up in the middle of the night to have your breakfast. I personally recommend you set your alarm for 4 a.m., eat something easy to digest, and then go back to sleep. Even if you don't go back to sleep, at this point, nutrition is more important than sleep. So lie down and rest. Hopefully you can sleep some more. But if you can't, again, the nutrition is more important than sleep at this point. The timing of when you can eat and drink during the race itself depends more on when you get the chance than following a set pattern. You might look at the event and say, well, I'll take a bar here and a gel there, and I'll drink here. But that plan will go out the window as soon as you start riding, because it just depends what's happening in the race. You need to be very careful eating or drinking when riding at high speed in a group. And frankly, you probably shouldn't do it. Unless you're totally confident of taking, picking up, drinking, and replacing your bottle without looking down, you shouldn't even consider it. Okay, so basically, you want to, of course, to start eating and drinking from the start, but again, only when it's safe and possible. Whenever you get a chance to drink, take it. You want to be taking on between 60 and 90 grams per hour of carbs, which is between 250, upwards of 250 to 500 calories. There's a slight error in the calculation there. Multiplied by 500 calories is for 120 grams, so it's actually a bit less. It's less than that. But the point is that one bottle or one gel is only 30 grams, so you're going to have to consume at least 2 or 3 items per hour. An item perhaps being a bottle or a gel. So 2 or 3 gels, and half a bottle of water, or a bottle of energy drink and a gel or 2 gels. Mix and match. Eating and drinking at high intensity, if you're riding in zone 5 for a while, is very, very hard. It's very different to eating in zone 3. When you're pushing hard, if you try to eat, you'll probably lose the wheel of the person in front of you, and you may even breathe in and get stuck in your windpipe what you're trying to eat. So pick your moment when the pace eases off a bit. I strongly suggest on this event preferring gels to energy bars or anything solid, because of the difficulty of chewing them, frankly. If you do want to take bars, then unwrap them in advance and make sure they're very easy to access. Now, if you need to stop, these are where the feed stations are. For both courses, the first one is at 40 kilometers. The courses are identical until 90 kilometers. So the first feed station is at 40, which I don't recommend you stopping at. It's really too early. There should be no reason whatsoever to stop there. And the second's at 83, so you might need to stop there, particularly if you've run out of water. I think you should be able to carry enough gels for the whole event, but you might need to stop for water. If your goal is to qualify, if that's what you're coming to this event for, then you should try to avoid stopping, or only stop very briefly for water. Ideally, you want to have a helper, a family member or a friend or someone, or a club friend, or whatever, at the feed station who can hand you a fresh water bottle or 2 fresh water bottles. That's the ideal. And then you just have to slow down, grab them, and carry on. Okay, I'm going to finish up with 6 go faster tips for you. The first and most obvious one, but it's amazing how many people make this error, is to have your bike in perfect condition before the event. It would really be too stupid to have an avoidable puncture or mechanical and lose your chance to qualify because of that. Okay, so make sure you get your bike checked. If you know what you're doing, check your bike yourself. If you're not sure what you're doing, take it to a mechanic and get it checked over in the days before the event. The second is to be as efficient as possible while you're climbing. The tip here is to keep your upper body completely still and relaxed, so you don't waste energy in your upper body with either moving it around or with tense shoulders and arms or whatever. Focus all your energy into your legs. You want to be driving just from the hips down and try to keep a supple, fluid pedal stroke. When you come to a steep section, you want to drop your heels and lock your ankle down. That's just on the steep sections. Otherwise, keep this supple, fluid pedal stroke. It's also important to stand up relatively frequently, especially on the steeper sections, or if you need to accelerate because you're losing the wheel of the person in front of you. Standing up has the advantage of changing your muscle recruitment patterns, and therefore it helps with fatigue. I generally recommend standing up close to 20% of the time, so 1 minute in 5 or 30 seconds every 2 or 3 minutes. Here's the third. It's amazing how many people don't do this. You should pedal downhill whenever it's safe to do so. Obviously, you're not going to do so if you're already going at 60 or 70 kilometers per hour and there's a corner coming up. But that's usually not the case. For very little energy, you get extra speed that's almost free. And on top of that, you keep your blood flowing through your legs to avoid them stiffening up and perhaps causing cramps on the next climb. So even if you don't really need the speed, you should turn your legs, without necessarily pressing on the pedals, for that reason, to keep the blood flowing and reduce the risk of cramps on the next climb. All right, this is a fourth tip. It's about the technique of bottoming. I've kind of hinted at it already, but it's important when a descent leads directly into the next climb. It's a real place gaining and energy saving technique all at once. So you can see the arrows I've put there. That's on the Medio Fondo course, or profile, but it's very similar on the Granfondo one. There are a number of places where the descent leads directly into the climb. So if you know that's the case, then get yourself as close as you can to the front of the group you're descending with. And when you hit the bottom, you want to hit the bottom and the subsequent rise at the highest possible speed and particularly cadence. And then keep your cadence high by changing gear as you start to slow down as the slope increases. And that gives you a lot of inertia, a lot of momentum, if you will, in your legs as they're spinning at high speed, which helps you up that first part of the climb. You'll see a high power output, but you will hardly feel it as an effort. And you can overtake a lot of people like that, or gain a lot of ground on the people behind you. And as I said before, if you're at the back of a group when you hit that bottom, you're likely to be slowed down by the people bunching out in front of you. So it's a huge advantage of being in front and following this technique. So there's a summary of what I've just said. All right, now point 5 is not to lose time because of your clothing. And this can sometimes be quite a challenge, especially if the start is very cold and it warms up later, because then you're going to be wearing clothes that you don't really want later. So at one point you're going to have to take them off and stuff them in your pockets or somewhere. So the first thing is to avoid having to take off clothing if at all possible. So start with the minimum clothes possible. Now, obviously, this is weather dependent. If it's very cold and wet, then you risk hypothermia if you start in summer kit. So be use your common sense about it. But the basic idea is to start with the minimum possible. And usually the best choice is to start with no more than a gilet and arm warmers. Especially if you've got a gilet which is waterproof, so it keeps your chest dry, then and arm warmers which are water repellent, that might be enough. If you must take something off during the ride, safety first has got to be the rule, and only take off a jacket, for example, when you're while riding, if you know how to do it, and if you're in a safe context. I've seen accidents both through people taking off their jackets when they didn't really know what they're doing and weren't able to do it safely. So you need to be absolutely sure you've got the skills to do it and do so without deviating from a straight line, because you don't know who's going to come up behind you when you're doing this. And anyone with common sense will give you a big margin, obviously, but things happen. So the advantage of wearing just a gilet and arm warmers is that you can easily adjust for being too hot by opening your gilet and by pushing down your arm warmers. You can see there I pushed down my arm warmers and I was absolutely fine like that. But I would have been much too cold had I started the whole event without the arm warmers. Sixth and final go faster tip, if you will. This is not go faster in terms of speed, but in terms of elapsed time. It's obvious, but again, people make this mistake time and time again. Minimize your stops, or preferably don't stop at all. As I mentioned earlier, if you can avoid stopping, that's perfect. And if you can get someone to pass you bottles, that's arguably even better, because then you're going to have more water. So if you must stop, okay, but keep it really, really short. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found this useful. If you'd like more tips, you can check out the Alpine Calls channel on YouTube. We've got quite a lot up there. It just remains for me to wish you good luck and stay safe and have a great ride on May the 19th.